you'll see just to the right of the chat window, there's a window called Q&A only. So if you have questions as we go, please drop those in the Q&A tab. I'm not going to be able to monitor all the chat as we go, but when we get to the end, I'll be answering questions live from the Q&A forum. So drop those there. We're going to try to keep the training here to about 60 minutes, maybe even a little less, and then we'll jump into questions. Now, I've got a new format. I've given this teaching a few times before and have changed up the format some. So actually, I'm going to do something fun here. We're going to vote. We can use the old training, which you guys have never seen, so you don't know what you're getting there, which is 10 steps to create a world-class micro-resort. Or we can use the new training, which is several stories that illustrate how to create one with lessons along the way, and then some tactical structural steps at the end of the stories, which is the new version that I've created. So if you want version 1, type 1. If you want version 2, type 2. I wish we had like a way to do a poll here. You're going to get the same information. The format's just going to be a little different, and you're going to hear more stories with the second version. So I'm going to have to do this kind of redneck. We've got 111, 22, 1. Oh boy, looks like we got kind of even numbers here. Don't have a landslide either way. I think 2 might be edging out 1. Man, it's tough. You're going to get the same information. You're just going to hear more stories with 2. So it's going to be more applicable in some ways. All right, we're going to go 2. We got lots of 2s coming in. Cool. Okay, let me make sure my computer is set. So let me start with my premise. I believe places that we create have the power to transform us. And trust me, there's probably 100 other trainings I want to do that we're not going to have time to dive into on deal structuring, underwriting. We're going to talk about some of those things. I mean, so many aspects of this. But the main focus that I want to emphasize today is the art. So there's an art and a science of creating a unique stay, a micro resort, a landscape hotel, whatever category we're talking about. And I am an artist at heart, and I believe that the art is the most important part. Yes, the numbers have to pencil, but if you don't get the art right, you're not going to create a place that can transform people, and therefore that can create the kind of virality, the kind of success that a property like mine, Live Oak Lake, or so many others have been able to achieve. Real quick introduction. So I'm Isaac French. I'm a husband to Helen, and we have 2 little boys. We live on a farm here in Texas. I grew up in a family of 12, so I have 9 siblings. Hospitality, craftsmanship, creativity, these weren't just values, they were a way of life. I was homeschooled, living on a farm. We would always be doing projects together. So building trails and tree houses and barns and decks and ponds. While my hands were busy building, my eyes were always studying. So sketching, painting the world around me. My grandmother's an artist. She gave us drawing and painting lessons since we were very little. And this intersection of building and seeking beauty is what led me to create something magical. These nature immersive hotels and unique stays that don't just house guests, but that, again, transform them. Which is what we're going to be talking about. Places where intentional design meets the greatest design of all, which is nature itself. So here's the big idea. Again, this is not about optimizing for the bottom line. It's about approaching real estate and hospitality as an art form. And in the process, helping guests rediscover wonder, creativity, and peace in a world that's increasingly digital, disconnected, and frantic. And I really believe that today, more than ever, people are starving for places like this. They don't want more stuff. They don't need more stuff. They want transformative experiences. So the first story is about Idaho. Most of my family still lives there. And one winter day, my dad gets a phone call. It's our 90-year-old neighbor, a dear farmer friend named Loyal. He needed help shoveling the snow off of his barn. And when my dad got there and looked inside the barn, his eyes lit up. Most people would just have seen a hunk of junk, myself included, but not my dad. He immediately knew what this was. He's a history and train aficionado, and this was a 120-year-old train car, 61 feet long. Well, fast forward 6 months, and my brothers and I, doing 99% of the work ourselves, transformed it into this one-of-a-kind stay. We bought that train car for $3,000 and turned it into this literally world-class, world-famous train destination in 6 months. So I'll show you a few pictures of the journey. Honestly, the hardest part was moving it. We had to move it about 10 miles to a little piece of property we owned. Again, 61 feet long, winding Idaho roads. It was quite a project. We found the original photo of this train car the day it was built, and then I was able to retrace all the original lettering. It's magical in all 4 seasons. This is 2 hours away from a major city or metropolitan area, from an interstate, from a major airport. So it's way off the beaten path. And yet, because we created this experience for people, they're willing to come from all over the world. We literally have guests coming from other countries, other continents, just to experience Car 306, $3,000. And then the next project, which a lot of people know me for, is called Live Oak Lake. So I just moved back to Texas after we finished the train car. I had $19,000 and a dream to create a village of cabins in nature. One morning, I found 5 acres on Zillow, just started looking on Zillow, and for a few months into that, found this property, knew something was different. It was just 5 minutes down the road, but had this little muddy, swampy pond on it, called the realtor up immediately, was there on site, meeting him within an hour. And when I stepped on site, I kid you not, I had goosebumps, within probably 15 seconds. I just knew this was the spot for that dream for the village of cabins to be built. Less than 10 months later, we opened the doors to Live Oak Lake, which is the stunning micro resort, 7 modern Nordic style cabins, this magical vibe of a small lake. One of the consistent compliments, and honestly the most meaningful compliment we ever received from guests, was they would say, when we drove through that front gate, it felt like we were entering into a whole different world, which is exactly what we were trying to create. 10 months start to finish. So a few pictures of the journey. This is the day after we closed. I was on site with a chainsaw in hand, clearing and burning brush. In the 30 days from that first day I found it, when we actually went under contract, to when we closed, I was on site almost every day, scheming and sketching and letting the land speak to me about what we should build. So I had this vision for cabins, but when I actually got on site and started, walking the land and noticing where the sun came up and went down, and the topography and how we could dig out and create this little lake, and where the trees were and all these different things, it became clear to me what that vision should be, how it should harmonize with the land instead of impose upon it. And so that was our guiding light. We had every challenge in the book you can imagine. So it was like the wettest spring on record. This is me about 3 months into the project, trying to get utilities in the ground, which coincidentally ran down our roadways, which meant we couldn't have roads, but we couldn't get the utilities in because it was so wet. Lumber prices tripled in 3 months from when we started to when we needed the lumber. And so, just every imaginable, roadblock that came up and decision that had to be made. I was designing and I was managing the construction, which had unique challenges and unique benefits. So it was 80 plus hours a week, but I was also able to value engineer, save money, make a lot of design decisions on the fly, and was a big part of getting this whole project done in 10 months. So again, 7 cabins. We have some really creative elements, like this is a shipping container with a 10-foot window in the side that we set up right next to the lake, and became the swimming pool with the commons area. Very iconic. a total marathon. We were stockpiling all the furnishings and a lot of the appliances and shipping containers because the supply chains were so delayed. I had to order this stuff like 6+ months out. And about 3/4 of the way through the project, one day I jump inside one of the cabins to help out the subcontractor who was installing one of those spiral stairs. And lo and behold, my extension ladder fell out from underneath me, and I fell about 10 feet and broke my pelvis, which was a pretty major deal. So again, like 3/4 of the way through the project, I find myself flat out in a hospital bed. That's my pelvis with a bunch of stainless steel in it now. It was crazy. Multiple surgeries. I was on crutches for the final 3 months of the project, but we got it through. So finally done in January 2022, we open our doors. I finally have a moment to breathe, and reviews are pouring in, reservations are pouring in. We're just really on Airbnb to start with. And one morning I wake up 2 weeks in, and I check the Airbnb app, and I took a screenshot. I'll never forget it. All of my listings said suspended. There had been no warning, no communication from them, and there was not much of any recourse. So I spent like a whole day on the phone, couldn't get anywhere. They said it's a different department. We're sorry, but there's nothing we can do. We don't know when or if your properties will ever come back online. We had a $20,000 loan payment due in like 3 weeks, and all of our cash flow just like instantly dried up. I was desperate, and for days, I was just searching for creative solutions to get around this, to see how we could generate some direct, marketing hype. Kind of built a website kind of overnight with booking links, a calendar, payment links, and then threw up kind of an Instagram page. Thankfully, I had taken like 6 or 7 progress photos. If you scroll back on my Instagram page, Isaac French, you'll see it. Like the first 6 or 7 photos were Live Oak Lake. I had like maybe 200 followers, and I thankfully during that time, one person had followed me who was a travel influencer, and she reached out to me one night. And I told her, like, look, this is where we're at. We don't have any bookings coming in. And she was like, man, I'm so sorry. I would love to help you, but I'm booked for the next 6 months, so I can't come out and promote your property. And there we were, like 2 weeks away from foreclosure. So I'm going to actually leave you with that story. So that way you have to stay to the end to hear how this resolves. We're going to come back to that. A few other projects I've built in the last couple of years. This is my backyard, which was a total jungle. I've been doing all these other projects really based off of my iPad on my couch. And it was time for a proper office. So I started sketching. Couldn't even walk into this jungle. This was actually after we had run a cedar eater. So it's a skid steer with an attachment through to create these trails. It was just a pure jungle. 5 months later, we opened the Nook. So this is where I am right now. This is my studio. It's also it has a loft bedroom, so we very well may rent this place out. There's been a ton of demand. It's gone very viral with a few posts that I've made from it. Again, just to show you how quickly you can move and build something beautiful. It's on the edge of a seasonal creek. Very similar aesthetic to Live Oak Lake, but with kind of a Texas hill country flair with the stone. My backyard looks a little better than it did at the end. Sorry, I was reading the comments. It looks a little better than it did before we started. And then one other project I'll show you quickly. This is actually about 300 yards from our front door. We took this 5-acre field, and some friends and I got together. I had this dream to create an orchard. You're going to wonder, where am I going with an orchard in the context of micro resorts? Well, I wanted to create an orchard that was as beautiful as it was fruitful. So we designed, built, and in 3 months, planted this 200-tree orchard. That's what it looks like today. The trees are thriving. We had to trench in irrigation. We put in these beautiful curving pathways, a whole pergola, and a garden in the middle. The whole neighborhood came together to plant all 200 trees. and we have bees to pollinate. That's my son Lucas. He was born like 2 weeks after we planted. So now the trees are like tripled in size. We have grapes around the entire perimeter. We have geese, and it's a beautiful spot. So the idea here is we're going to host weddings, have workshops, tours here in the orchard. So again, we're going to be able to monetize through hospitality. Plus, I am considering building a small hotel kind of immersed inside of this with a few units. If not, we still have the Nook. So this is part of the farm experience we want to offer our guests. So the through line with all of these projects is always the same, which is crafting spaces where people truly feel alive. And I believe that nature is the place where humans feel the most alive. Okay, so now I want to go over some accommodation types. So I've told you some stories about what's possible. Now I want to show you kind of a spectrum of options from simple and affordable to more complex and costly. So you can see what's possible at any scale. But there's two fundamental principles here. The first I've already mentioned is letting the landscape lead, letting the setting dictate the accommodations instead of the other way around. Very important. And I see this mistake a lot of people make. They impose some vision. They saw someone else successful with a certain unit type in a certain location, so they just try to copy and paste that onto their property instead of, again, letting the land speak to you and really learning to harmonize with it. So you're going to see some examples of how to do that. The second principle is what I have up there: build less but better. So this is like my number one piece of advice to folks that want to know how to build a viral destination. Build fewer units than you think you need and spend more money on them. So do less, but do it better. You would not believe like the kind of impact you can have by concentrating your efforts, your investment, your resources into, again, a smaller footprint, but being exceptional in how you do it. Okay, so the first one is pretty straightforward. This is like an extra bedroom, lowest hanging fruit, assuming you already have some type of house. This is how Airbnb got started. You could renovate an extra bedroom. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to spend much time here. There are so many ways, though, you can offer the experience by simply already having an accommodation. For one, it allows you to potentially, as the host, be involved, kind of like the traditional B&B model, where your story, your personality, your care is a real, part of the experience that you're marketing. All right, glamping tents and yurts. So in all fairness, I am not a huge fan of soft-sided units. So this could be tents, domes, yurts. However, there's reasons for that. There's, durability is one, saturation is another. Because they're so easy, they're so cheap, anyone can throw them up, and it's harder to stand out. Air conditioning and heating is another one, depending on the region that you're in and the climate. But they can be a great sort of like minimum viable product to test the concept. So these range in price from $5,000 on the low end to $100,000+. I would say like a good benchmark is like $20,000 to $30,000 for really any unit type in that category. Tents, yurts, domes. You can get some creative uses out of it. Again, it's not my personal favorite. There are hard-sided versions as well. These are a great way, like if you've got a beautiful piece of land, you have a very limited budget, to layer in accommodations, to create kind of an MVP type of experience. Moving on to cottages, cabins, and casitas. Yeah, just a quick clarification. I haven't really checked the Q&A, but if you have questions, throw it in the questions. We're going to get to all that at the end, but we're going to keep moving through the stories and the basic roadmap here for the time being. So there's a lot of overlap between several of these categories, but this is a property in New Mexico called Los Poblanos. It's this historic inn with like 45 units. And they have these old, they're very, kind of mediocre, featureless casitas that were adobe. But then they planted this garden around it, and you can see they've almost created like this three-dimensional landscape that embeds the units into it. So these gardens are spectacular. We've stayed in that unit right there, and the experience there is all about, they have an organic lavender farm, they have this incredible garden, a farm experience, but the setting is fantastic. And again, thinking about landscape is the place that, nature is the place that people feel the most alive. This property does a great job of that, using some pretty basic cabins. These probably cost about $40,000 each to build. These cabins here are at the Lost Kitchen in Maine. So this is a really cool story. You guys, some of you guys have probably heard of Airden French. By the way, there's no connection there that I know of. My last name's French too, but we're not related. She is this chef that had no formal experience, and she had an amazing personal story and background, broken background that she came from. But anyways, a few years ago, she started cooking these farm-to-table meals at small farms around rural Maine and started to kind of build up a name. And lo and behold, an opportunity arose in her hometown of Freedom, Maine, which is like 500 people live there. And she was able to partner with an investor who fixed up this original, I don't have a picture of it, but this original grist mill, flour mill, and started hosting her dinners there. Well, and I'm going to get around to these cabins, but you got to hear the backstory. This is incredible. Well, a few years into it, she really started building up a following. She was clearly like an extremely talented hostess and chef, and would kind of create these family style dinners. There was no menu. She would just, host it with her team, and it was really an experience. Well, the post office, which was kind of the only thing that her town had going for it, was about to close down because of a lack of business. And she wanted to help out. So she thought, well, what if I started making all of my guests send in a handwritten postcard in order to book a reservation at my kitchen, at my restaurant. She called it the Lost Kitchen. And, most people would think, well, now you're introducing a layer of friction because you want people to, who has time, who writes postcards and mails those off to go eat dinner somewhere. Well, what this actually did was create this incredible mystery and fun experience. Within 1 year, she had 60,000 reservations handwritten, mailed in. She saved her post office. She was totally inundated. I think there's a total of like 1,800 available seats. It's a seasonal thing. She only runs in the summer, spring, summer, and fall, and she can seat like 40 people. So already, the acceptance rate to get into the Lost Kitchen, it was easier to get into Harvard than to eat at her restaurant. And this is like a $450 experience. So guests are coming from all over the world. She's created this unbelievable attraction through this incredible experience. But she's kind of in the middle of nowhere. So then a few years ago, actually during COVID, she decided to build these little cabins. And these, I've been there, they're incredibly simple, just one room, very tastefully done though. About, 500 yards from the mill where people eat. And these probably cost her around $20,000 each to build. People spend hundreds of dollars a night just to stay here. They don't even have a bathroom. There's an outhouse. There's like 7 of these cabins, and there's a little outhouse. So this is an incredible example where she already had this amazing attraction, destination experience, which most of us don't have, but she was very creative, realized the opportunity here, and maybe somebody else in your area, maybe you don't have this type of experience that someone else does. There's another amazing attraction or restaurant. If you could be close enough and you can create a cohesive experience, accommodation experience for them, you could leverage that. Or maybe you do create your own restaurant type experience. It doesn't have to be a restaurant. I'm just giving this as an illustration. Very simple cabins, and these things probably paid for themselves in the first 4 to 5 months. She's bringing in like $300 to $500 a night. So that's that story. Speaking of cabins, this is another project I've done. I have never really shared this project publicly. So a few years ago, we found an in-holding up in the National Forest. This is rural Idaho, about an hour away from that train car that I showed you. And we bought the property for $2,000 an acre, okay? All included. There's this old cabin that's on the brink of collapse that's hand-hewn, beautiful cabin, but it's about to collapse. It's about 100 years old. We look back in the history. It's vague, but we find there was this old copper and zinc mine in this valley. This is truly the middle of nowhere. And these homesteaders 100 years ago, when that mine was active, tried to make a go of it up here to, provide sustenance for those miners. They had 8 kids. There's, of course, no utilities. There's no cell coverage. So we bought the property, and we all stayed out there as a family this Labor Day weekend. And we saw this cabin, and we realized, okay, the roof part is rotten, but these logs are still perfectly good. So we took it apart in one day. We dismantled the whole cabin, just kind of like Lincoln logs. And then a few days later, we poured a slab, built a new foundation, re-erected those logs, built a roof structure. My brothers and I did all the work. In 5 weeks, we put this cabin back up. It's nothing fancy or luxurious, but it's a special place. It's totally off grid. There's an outhouse next door. It's kerosene lanterns. We have that cold, rushing creek out the front door. We put up a rail fence, and we actually don't rent this one out commercially. There's a ton of demand for it, but for personal reasons, we just kind of keep it as like a family and friends retreat. But this is an example. Literally, we spent $32,000, I believe, all in on the renovation. The cabin was free. It was $2,000 per acre to buy this piece of land. We spent $32,000. We did the labor ourselves, but we've got this one-of-a-kind, off-grid, historic experience. So these are just examples of being creative, and a lot of these you're noticing are restoration, because I think that there's such a beauty in taking old, overlooked, forgotten relics, pieces of history, and redeeming those things. Story is so important in creating an experience and a place that will move someone. And there's no better story than like history. And so finding these kind of properties, or whether it's this or a $3,000 train car that's full of cats that's rotting in a neighbor's barn, there's an abundance of opportunities. All right, so now we're going to talk about tree houses and A-frames. So this is a property called Piaule, Piaule. It's in the Catskills. By the way, I think the Catskills is a fantastic location for micro resorts. There's a lot of places. We'll talk about kind of the qualifications, but there's obviously a massive population proximity, and land is quite cheap, very beautiful. So this is a friend of mine who owns this. It's like a 22-unit hotel. This place rents for $1,000 a night. Beautiful. These units are actually custom built, but you could do a prefab that's very similar to this. Just beautiful, nature immersive. I like how these units kind of float in the trees. This is another friend, Chris, with Evergreen Cabins. Oh man, I've got so many stories, but you got to hear this one. This is so good. So a few years ago, actually, the A-frame on the right was his first project. Like almost 10 years ago, actually. He was a carpenter, like living week to week, paycheck to paycheck, and lived in Connecticut. His wife was pregnant with their first child and got in a car accident. Someone rear-ended her, and thank God she was okay. The baby was okay. But as part of the insurance settlement, they got like $17,000 check. Okay, not a lot of money. They found 5 acres in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. They bought the 5 acres, just trees. And for 3 years, Chris would drive 6 hours to go up for the weekend and build this A-frame. So he built that A-frame on the right, cost him $75,000. But this isn't just any old A-frame. I love this. So $800 of materials literally changed the trajectory of his life and has inspired millions of people. So with rubber gaskets, some metal track, and a garage door opener, he built a slide-out bed. So check this out. The second story slides out onto this deck. I mean, how creative is that for $800? And this feature, I'm telling you, has gone so viral. It's been featured in pretty much every major architectural publication. He told me it's like 300 plus million views and counting on social media. Within 6 to 7 months, the cabin was completely paid off, and that was 6 years ago that he built it. So this place has probably paid for itself something like 20 times over. Absolutely insane. Then he built the treehouse that you see on the left with the suspension bridge. Now he's building a mirror cabin. He's got a waterfall cabin. He's got all these incredible places. He's got like 7 of them on this 5 acres. Look it up. It's called Evergreen Cabins. I love the ingenuity here. This is experiential hospitality. This is being creative, thinking outside the box, and not necessarily spending more, but again, having a unique vision and a story to tell. All right, we got another cool story. These are some folks in Montana. They took grain silos and converted them into 2-story accommodations. This is our story. So another piece of property that we found, this is also in rural Idaho, for $1,360 per acre, $1,360 per acre, all included. So again, I know it sounds crazy, but these kind of places exist. This is in the middle of nowhere. It's an old wheat farm, had a crumbling barn on it, again, probably a year or 2 away from completely collapsing, and it was hand-hewn. So this is a Dutch timber frame barn, incredibly rare, probably one of the last hand-hewn barns, timber frame barns ever built in the country, about 110 years old. So we bought it, and this project took about 12 months start to finish, but that's what it is today. It's a wedding venue with 3-story silo, quote unquote, next door, which you'll hear about. So we dismantled the whole thing. We saved the whole frame. Most of the exterior wood was rotten, but the beams, the timbers were what were really valuable. We poured a foundation. We re-erected the whole thing. That roofing is new, but the rafters, the timbers, all of that's original. Added these incredible windows, but there were some delays during this project on those windows. So instead of sitting around and waiting, my brother John had this bright idea to build this silo next door. So it looks like a silo. It's clad with tin, but it's actually accommodations on the 2nd and 3rd floor, and then the 1st floor is a commercial kitchen. So weddings and family reunion type of events is what we had in mind. So that's the before. It was full of old equipment, and that's the after. So now we've been open a couple years now. We're booking out this year. I think we're going to do about 22 weddings. This is again 2 hours from a major city or an interstate. And especially when you think about these other projects like the train car, there's a bunch more that I haven't even told you about. I don't have time to, but in this local area that we've done, we're creating an ecosystem that each new project then benefits the others. And so we're creating like an entire destination for folks to come out and experience. Next door was this old farmhouse that was, same 110 years old, but it was clad in siding and aluminum vinyl. It was really yucky. We took the whole thing apart. There was no foundation. So we had to pour a new foundation, and we restored it into this beautiful antique farmhouse. Again, totally stripped it. You used like old antiques from local garage sales and antique shops to furnish it, and it feels like you're stepping back in time when you stay there. So now we rent the farmhouse out separately for like $500 a night, or we'll rent it out with the whole property. So we call it Morning Glory Farm. There's still a couple original buildings which we haven't restored yet. They're just more of like tack sheds. 2 of my siblings now live over on this property. And so we're creating a whole farm destination. You can kind of see the little gazebo down the bottom where a lot of the weddings happen. So we planted a garden. We have sheep. We're doing all kinds of regenerative agriculture, and we're going to build out an entire farm experience. All right, and finally we have a full-fledged landscape hotel. So again, you could use prefabs for this. These ones are from a company called Backcountry Hut Company, which a lot of prefabs I'm not a fan of because, again, similar to the yurts or geodomes, they're very easy to replicate. Your neighbor could technically go buy them, and then what differentiates you? I think there's a place for them. Obviously, the higher quality, the more architectural ones for sure. You do save a little bit on cost, and you do have a little bit more of an advantage when it comes to quality control and consistency, but some of those benefits are less pronounced than you might think. That's Live Oak Lake again. 7 cabins total, 4 around the water, 3 on the creek adjacent. These were built from scratch. We spent around $220,000 for these cabins, which is a lot more than most people would assume. They're about 450 square feet each. 5 of them are 2-bedroom, 2 of them are 1-bedroom. But again, we spent more because we created exceptional locations. Like they're very beautiful inside and out. The finish quality, the landscaping. And one note I want to make there, landscaping is the highest return on investment money you can spend. So landscaping typically happens at the end of a construction project. So it's usually like everyone's already blown their budget on other things. And that's a huge mistake because there's a principle here. The day you plant a tree is the least valuable that tree will ever be until the day it dies, which is hopefully decades down the road. But the day you build a structure is the most valuable the structure will ever be because structures depreciate. Now, the underlying real estate most likely will appreciate. But this is why a lot of people just think, oh, let's just rake it out and spread some grass seed instead of actually going through the, incredibly valuable work of creating a beautiful landscape through boulders and water features and plants and trees and all those elements that again harmonize with your given. So the trees that are there, the water feature that might already be, the natural water feature that might already be there, etc. This is a farm hotel in New Mexico. No, $220,000 to build each of those 7 cabins. So we spent $2.3 million building Live Oak Lake. We'll get back to that story in just a minute to finish that off. This is this beautiful place called Los Poblanos in New Mexico. An amazing farm hotel, rents out for 45 units, rents out for between $300 and $700 a night. This is kind of the pinnacle, like unbelievable, most impressive hotel experience I've ever had in my life. It's called Babylon Storen in South Africa. And it's a 16th century Dutch farm in the Western Cape. Purchased in mid-2000s by a couple with an incredible vision and great taste, and they redesigned the entire place. And I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like 1,700 acres, 3 world-class restaurants. Everything you eat is grown on site. They have butcher shop and creamery and vineyards, olive groves, the most beautiful 8-acre garden you've ever seen in your life. I mean, incredible. This is about a $1,500 a night stay, booked all the time. But I'm telling you, like, if this was in the United States, I think you could probably get $5,000 a night for this. I've stayed at places here in the U.S. that were over $6,000 for one night. Amangiri, which is probably like the most famous landscape hotel in the world in Utah, and this place trumped that by a mile. Like this experience was unbelievable. And quick side note, I think farm hospitality is the #1 opportunity inside of the greater experiential hospitality niche. The problem is, like, most people just don't know how to marry farming and gardening, growing your food, animals with like luxury, hospitality, comfort, good design. And so those things just typically historically have not meshed well. So if you can do that, like if you're already homesteading or you have an old family farm, that's an amazing opportunity to layer in the accommodations and design an experience around that. This is that garden. It's unbelievable. This place is obviously like way out of the league of what most people here are going to shoot for, what I would shoot for. I mean, it's 300 staff, 300 person staff property. But I'm just saying, like, in terms of what's possible, this is probably the best example. Okay, so let's go through a few practical, tactical details. I hope you guys have enjoyed all these stories and examples that apply regardless of the scale of your project. So #1, this one's pretty obvious. Design is the greatest amenity. So creating an atmosphere through thoughtful details, lighting, textures, decor, landscaping, like I mentioned, the highest return on investment, money that you can spend. And I know a lot of people are wondering about financing, so I want to talk about that for just a minute. assuming that you're not independently wealthy, most of us probably aren't, there are several different routes you can go here. Okay, so I used a construction loan. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. SBA loans are, especially the 7A program, are some of like the best loan vehicles to funding a micro resort. There are only some banks that will work with you on that. A good one that I know of is called Live Oak Bank. There's no affiliation there, but I have a lot of respect. They've worked with a lot of folks I've helped. And they do construction loans and SBA specific loans, and they work across the country. They're in North Carolina, but they definitely understand the outdoor hospitality space like few do. USDA, there are some USDA loan programs as well that are, especially like if you're going the farming routes, that are very interesting. In general, like these government programs are going to be the most competitive when it comes to the lowest interest rates, the lowest amount down. There's just going to be more hoops to jump through. So it's probably going to take you like a good 6 months to go through the process of getting an SBA loan versus maybe 3 to 4 months for a construction loan. Construction loan has its own challenges. Like I got that because I was able to bring in a couple of investors that had a small construction company that I had actually worked for that were willing to co-guarantee the loan, and in exchange, I gave them 40% equity. So the bank, unless you have like a lot of experience, a lot of liquidity, is just not going to entertain a construction loan. But that all being said, there's a lot easier path today to getting a loan to build a micro resort than there was 4 years ago when I built mine, because we have precedents like Live Oak Lake, which I'm going to come back to, but it's an incredible full circle story when you see the results, which I've been very transparent about sharing. This is the one I want to highlight: rewards-based crowdfunding. I absolutely love this option because you don't have to give up any equity. And so here's how it works in a nutshell. You know, when most people hear crowdfunding, they think of like Kickstarter, where you're selling fractional shares of your product, your business, whatever it is, in exchange for an initial investment, a fractional investment. So it could be a few hundred, a few $1,000s. The beauty of this is that you're not giving away any equity. So the way it works, and I've got 3 friends all in my masterclass community or in Circle that know, that have done this exact process. 2 of them are currently in construction. 1 is already open. So it costs about $10,000 to $15,000 upfront. You have to build out your marketing, so project design, renderings, a website, a landing page. And then you start testing Facebook ads to hone in on the appropriate demographic and your hottest leads, so to speak, and say that 2-hour geographical proximity of your project. So in most cases, you should already own the land, but it could technically work if you're only under contract. And then the pitch is simple. It's like, if you want to be part of a groundbreaking project in small town XYZ, which they're all going to know, you can get 30% off of your stay in exchange for an initial investment. So I'm just generalizing numbers here. Maybe you offer tiers, 20, 30, 40%. And in exchange, they're giving you, they're pre-booking their stay. So in all 3 of these examples I'm talking about, they raised different amounts. So one was like 500,000, one was 800,000, and one was just under $1 million. They raised in 4 months, start to finish. So it takes about 3 months to actually acquire the leads. They're putting $50 down to just become eligible to book a stay, and then on an appointed day, they open the calendar, and folks can give me just 1 second. I will be right. Sorry, I had the keys to our car in my pocket. My wife was trying to leave, and she didn't know how to start the car. I'm back. So they put down $50 on the appointed day. They open the calendar, and they can book their stay. And so again, the $50 deposits essentially funded the ad spend. So they only had like that $10,000, $15,000 out of pocket, even though they spent, say, $200,000 to $300,000 in ad spend to acquire a couple thousand hot leads, but that was self-funded because of the $50 deposits, non-refundable. And you can set the rules on this. So fast forward 4 months, you have, to be conservative, call it $500,000. Now you have $500,000 earning interest in a checking account. You have a huge proof of concept and validation for a bank in order to even get a loan. And you have, potentially some cash that you could spend maybe up to 50% of in order to bridge the gap between the loan and the actual project cost. So that's kind of boiling it down to its simplest form. We have this whole playbook, but it's an incredible way to go from 0 to 1 if you don't have a lot of money, if you don't have a lot of experience, but you've got an amazing story. You can share that story, and you can get all this buy-in at scale from future guests. Okay, so now talking about telling the story, this is such a critical part. A lot of people get hung up here. The key is you're not trying to market, you are telling the story. So people ask me, what was your number one mistake in building Live Oak Lake? What's the number one thing you wish you could do differently? And I've arrived at the simple conclusion that it was that I did not share that story. So I mentioned in the beginning, I was able to document like 5 or 6 photos, literally total, and post throughout the journey. In my case, it worked out, and it was probably to my benefit because I was on such a crunch time frame that I couldn't have handled any more distraction. But just know that when you're going from 0 to 1 and you don't have an experience, you're at the dream stage even, before you have land, before you have money, or anywhere along that journey, you're sitting on a gold mine of content. So from a storytelling perspective, everyone wants to follow along and root for an underdog in your position, in my position 4 years ago. And I could give you so many examples of this, but here's the secret. People don't connect with polish. They connect with presence. They connect with authenticity. They want to see not just the finished product, they want to see the journey. And if you're a perfectionist like I am, you really have to overcome that, that desire to always be perfect in everything, even when it comes to creating the content itself. A couple quick examples. Look up Rajan Cheetah. So that's spelled RAJAN. Okay, let me just type it in the chat. On Instagram, this kid has gone totally viral in the last few months. So he was inspired by my project Live Oak Lake, and just graduated college with one of his classmates, and together they bought a tiny piece of land in rural Virginia and have been building this one cabin. Well, in 4 months of doing that, through being consistent and posting 1 reel a day on Instagram, they built up almost 500,000 followers. And, again, like probably 200 million impressions by now. When they open the doors here in a month, I'm going to guess they're going to be booked out within like 2 to 3 weeks for an entire year. So incredible format. Like he's unique. He's speaking to his generation. He has this series, so he's got this one hook. It's like, day 1, day 67 of building Virginia's #1 luxury cabin in the mountains. And then he just figures out, so he figured out the template that worked, and now he's just crushing it, and he's got this massive following. Another one is Devin Lorop. So this kid actually built, the year I was building Live Oak Lake, he built a shipping container cabin in the mountains of Washington State called the Pacific Bay. I'm going to type that in the chat as well. With an iPhone and a $20 tripod, and he was doing like 99% of the work himself, just usually capturing time lapses and then like stitching together before and after reels with trending audios. Built 1.5 million followers in 12 months. Probably the most viral Airbnb in the world. When he opened, he told me within 2 weeks he was booked out like 85% of the entire year. And this place is like $800 a night. Now he's built a second cabin. The opportunities that come to you by simply telling your story are insane. Again, sharing the process, sharing the journey. So the story is so central to this entire endeavor. You have a story, your property has a story, the history, the character, the transformation, and your guests have a story too. They're going to create one when they come. And so everything you're doing through the design that we've talked about is setting the stage for this story that they're never going to forget. So how do you tell that story? Well, I've told you social media. What it boils down to is word of mouth is the world's best and oldest marketing strategy. Social media is just a megaphone and a multiplier for word of mouth marketing. It's an invitation to a real relationship. Think of it as like building trust at scale. And so if you do this right, guests will supercharge your efforts. And, essentially, you've heard the phrase, the product is the marketing, the experience is the marketing. So yes, you are telling your story, but you're also setting the stage. You're designing moments that guests feel just compelled to capture and share. Super simple piece of advice when it comes to applying all of this. Write first, and then think about visuals. So photography, videography, that comes second. If you want to learn to tell good stories, you got to learn to write. Simply, like copywriting courses can be great for this. It's what advertisers use to write words that sell products. So you got to have a strong hook. You've got to understand pacing. You've got to have a certain structure. You've got to have an emotional impact close. And writing, whether it's through LinkedIn or Twitter or like a newsletter, could be a great forcing function. Writing will help you even from like a concept phase of figuring out what your project is, if you don't know that yet. And certainly from a storytelling perspective, once you're building it, it will help you understand and condense and clarify those stories. And then you can create short form reels like on Instagram or TikTok. Show up authentically. We talked about this one. Show the disaster, show the delays, show the muddy boots, the behind the scenes moments. And then finally leverage partnerships. So this could be other creators, makers, chefs. Influencers are the craziest arbitrage though. If you do this right, it's insane. So speaking of partnerships, let me come back and we're going to close by I'm going to tell you the rest of the Live Oak Lake story. So I left you in a little bit of a suspenseful moment. We were suspended. There was no recourse, nothing Airbnb could do. That influencer texted me. She said, "Sorry, I can't do it, but it probably would help you." Well, she threw out the name of another influencer after I pressed her, who was in Dallas. I still remember it. It was called Dallas Sites 101. That's the handle on Instagram. And I DM'd them and told them the situation. They were like, "Yeah, we want to give away Venmo us $950." So I did that. We had just thrown up our Instagram. We had just thrown up our website, and the giveaway goes live. The next 7 days are totally wild. And a week later, we had $40,000 of direct bookings and 5,000 plus followers from scratch. We had created this magical experience full of moments, and those pictures went super viral. This was even before Instagram kind of shifted to videos, just pictures. So as fate would have it, I think it was God, but 2 days later, Airbnb restored our account. So if it hadn't been for that near disaster, I never would have at least taken it this seriously, going direct. So we went all in on direct. We spent $40,000 in those first few months experimenting with different partnerships. There was so many lessons along the way about how to work with influencers. And then a few months into that, started creating our own content that started going viral. So guests were sharing it. I was kind of bootstrapping PR. We had local press coming out doing stories. We had influencers posting, and it was a rocket ship. So within 6 months, we were up to 50,000. Within 12 months, we had over 100,000 followers. 80% bookings were direct. And the benefits of direct are insane. Number one, you cannot be deplatformed, so you can actually sleep at night. Number two, there's no data wall. And so you have their email, you can actually retarget them, and now you're building a relationship. We had guests come back, I think, 3 times in 1 year because we'd already done the hard work of building this beautiful experience. And then number 3, you're getting a more aspirational guest to start with because they're not finding you by price shopping next to 20 other listings on a booking channel. They see this beautiful, immersive, content on their Instagram feed, and they have FOMO. And so maybe they're not going to book immediately, but they're going to follow you, and then they're going to start seeing more of your content, and then eventually they're going to book a stay there. And then finally, you're making like an additional 15% bottom line profit. But again, we had done the most important part, which was actually we had an amazing story, and we had created a platform for guests to have stories. Do not underestimate the power of Vibe and of Instagram. Fast forward 18 months from when we opened the doors, we had over $1 million of first year revenue, over 550,000 of net profit. We had almost 200,000 followers on Instagram. Again, we had spent $2.3 million all in building Live Oak Lake, and 18 months later, we sold the whole property for $7 million, so $1 million per cabin. And again, that's the power of building a brand, building a one-of-a-kind experience. All right, to bring this home, start small and keep it simple. Fewer but better. One unit even, and one great experience is all you need to watch the flywheel crank and the ripples start spreading. Again, I believe places have the power to transform people when you create them with care. And really, this is about this is so much more than just building a beautiful business. This is about creating beauty and putting beauty into the world and making your corner of the world beautiful. So I hope that inspired you. We're going to jump into Q&A in just a moment. Before we do that, I'm going to just share with you a special offer. This will just take a couple minutes. So if you've been inspired by this and you want to create your own micro resort or unique stay, education is just the first step. But that's where most people fail. You could spend your whole life educating yourself, but actually not, implementing it. So I have a program. Some of you may know about it. It's a comprehensive masterclass and a community of like the best builders in the entire space. We have a couple hundred around the country building. And it's hands-on, designed to help you take action, get results. And this is not for everyone. We can only work with people who are financially and mentally in a position to start executing on everything we just talked about and so much more. But if you're looking for real guidance, real support system, a personalized strategic plan, a bank-approved underwriting model, and on, then we may be able to help you. So that QR code, you can book a free call with my team. This is not a high-pressure sales call. We want to understand what your goals are, talk through that regardless of if you come with the program or not. I think you're going to get value from this, but please only book a call if you're serious about number one, showing up, and number two, creating a property like this. I'm also going to throw a link in the chat in case you don't have your phone on you. And we do have limited spots available, so only book if you're serious again about taking action. And if the calendar is already full when you go to book, feel free to shoot me an email personally. I'll drop my email in the chat as well, and I'll make sure we find time. All right. With that, we're going to jump into questions. So let me open up. Let me grab a drink first. It's a little bit of a fire hydrant, wasn't it? I forgot to mention, if you book a call from this, I guess it says it on there, but we're giving $1,500 off of the sticker price, which is $8,000. So it's $6,500 if you end up joining. Only for those on the call that book from this. Okay, Q&A. What are your thoughts on the capsule homes from China versus similar small homes built in the USA? I don't know if I've seen capsule homes. I kind of mentioned prefabs in general. Let me look up capsule. What I will say is that, I don't see. If you don't mind, send me, like Volferta. Those are a little gimmicky in my opinion. I actually have seen one of those in person at the glamping show. If that's the same thing, and not a huge fan. They're also very hard. Like if something breaks to get parts, you got to be very careful with stuff made in China because it's all great when it comes to buying it and you're getting a discount, but when it comes to servicing systems and replacing a toilet or whatever, I've heard horror stories. I also need to qualify. There is a fraudulent company on Instagram called I'm just going to call them out because I'm so angry at them, called Joha, I think it's called, Joha. I may be wrong with that. With a huge following, and I didn't even know about it, and someone tagged me. They're posting other people's content and claiming those units are theirs. So they posted several Live Oak Lake videos and said, this is our unit, you can buy it for $25,000 in, this is one of our units set up in Texas. Again, total lie. We got, actually, someone reached out, they had booked a ticket to come stay at Live Oak Lake so they could see one of these Joha units in person. So you got to be really careful. Okay, it's called Live Oak Lake, my property. The 7 cabins have septic systems. So there was no city sewage, so we designed and built a commercial system, one system for the whole property. That was the hardest permitting piece of the whole project. It's an aerobic system. It took about 3 months to engineer, another couple months to get approved, and about 4 months to install. And it relies on electricity. It pumps the sewage. First of all, there's like uphill. There's tanks that have to be pumped uphill because of the locations of the cabins, and then it gets treated, and then it gets sprayed out at night. So it's kind of a complicated system. And in a lot of cases, if you're in a rural area, a traditional, just kind of in-ground, leach field system is going to be your best route. Our soil type was a problem where we were. We also didn't have enough room to trench all the lines in. So that's why we did aerobic. How big is the lake? It's about 1.25 acres. So a little pro tip here, if you're building a lake or a pond, don't just build a circle or a square. Create a unique shape. Like the Live Oak Lake is sort of like a heart shaped, which allowed for like all these fun little peninsulas, and it made the whole place feel bigger than it actually was. Okay. On the QR code, is that for people like me who have the land farm and some infrastructure, just people who have cash and are looking to partner invest? No, it's for both, but it's especially actually kind of for the former category. People that have the dream that, or people that already have the land but don't know how to design, what to build, how to build it, how to market it, how to get funding, etc. All right, my average, so we averaged 95% occupancy at Live Oak Lake. Crazy, I know. The first year, our RevPAR, so revenue per available room, was right around $500 a night. What is your recommendation on how far apart to build each cabin? That depends on the topography, the trees, whatever other views or privacy might be a consideration, but we definitely spaced ours out further than would have been optimal when it comes to building costs. But we created this magical experience that was honed. The vision was honed through spending time on the land, envisioning what would it feel like to walk out of your cabin, like very visceral. Like you got your coffee in the morning, you're walking down to the water. This tree right here is kind of like screening you from that cabin over there, but you kind of want to see this view of the lake, all those different factors. So the site plan is very important. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole journey. We work through that in the program quite a bit as well. All right, can you tell us about how you did social marketing? Okay, so I already answered that. How do you establish pricing for rates? We used a dynamic pricing tool. We raised our rates probably 10 times in the first year because to keep up with demand. As our social following was exploding, we cover all of that in the course. Okay, where are my structural companies to improve? So some of these properties we had to drill a well. Others of them we had city water or municipal water line nearby. Both are acceptable. Utilities are a huge question when it comes to permitting and like what is actually feasible to build, and one of the key questions you need to address during your due diligence period if you're going under contract on a piece of land before you actually put hard money down or purchase it, in addition to zoning and whatnot. Okay, community banks are awesome if you're looking for a construction loan. I mentioned Live Oak Bank. that's going to be probably your best bet for an SBA loan. How many people are on this webinar? Interesting question. We have 238 right now. Is it okay if we live on the same property? 100%. And that's actually an advantage because then you're right there, both for the building process and for the operating, which could be a huge key, to servicing, creating the exceptional experiences, and potentially another touch point with the guest. Did you go into it with the intention of selling the property or keep it for the long-term rental income? We built it for both. We built it to keep it, but because it was, which I always recommend, in other words, don't cut corners with the build, with the systems, because if it's successful for you, then the chances are someone else, that's like your best chance of someone else wanting to buy it. So we were approached by a few different buyers. The one that we settled with was the best offer, was a great fit. And we just couldn't say no to that kind of return in that period of time. I don't want to spend too much more time on the crowdfunding. Someone's asking about that. It's a very compelling topic, but I kind of already spent quite a bit, and I'm more than happy to cover. We have multiple people in our group that have gone through this exact process, and we've had many conversations. I'll give you one other resource. LaunchBoom is an agency, no affiliation with it, but that's been very successful in helping coach people through the playbook I mentioned, using Indiegogo as the crowdfunding platform. Okay. What are the typical qualifications you look for when selecting an influencer to promote your property? So engagement is quality over quantity when it comes to followers. Engagement is like the number one metric. They should be able to show you some back-end stats for the kind of engagement their content typically generates. You want to structure the agreement around, very clear deliverables. In my case, what we found worked best was a reel, like a 60-second reel, promoting the property, promoting a 2-night stay giveaway. We would give away the night for the 2 nights for free. The rules were that guests had to, or entrants had to follow both the influencer and our account and tag at least 2 or 3 friends, and additional entries. Additional tags were additional entries. That worked well. The best travel influencers are worth their weight in gold. Like, the arbitrage is huge, but there's usually only like 2 or 3 in every location that are worth this. But we would spend $3,000 to $5,000 per partnership on those best ones. Again, in those cases, they probably did have several 100,000 followers, but most importantly, they had the right kind of followers. So foodies, travel, so luxury travel. They could be staying at hotels. They could be staying at unique Airbnbs. And a lot of them will have done this type of giveaway because it's now kind of become a popular format because of my story and several others. Okay, remember, if all slots are taken, send me an email at isaac@experientialhospitality.com, and I will make sure we can find a time if you're serious about a call to check out the program. Let's get a few more questions here. Do you recommend the glamping show? Well, I'm going to be speaking there next week, so if you want to come say hi, it is a cool spot. I went there last year just as a guest, and they have a ton of like prefab units to tour. Great guests. There's a great lineup of speakers this year. So would love to say hi if you want to come through. It's in Aurora, Colorado, and it's next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I think. Okay, what part of the business were you able to automate with systems or maybe even VAs? Great question. A lot of it. So we used HostAway, which I highly recommend as a property management software, sort of as like the operations hub. So that's where it would aggregate calendars where you could be listed on Airbnb, VRBO, and Direct and Booking.com, whatever. It had a booking engine, so that would then plug in through a widget to your own website. And then, using Stripe as a payment link, we could facilitate bookings, but we never had to worry about overlaps. Then we had smart home hardware. We had door locks, thermostats, noise monitors, lighting. that could be remotely controlled, and most of that was automated. So messages were automated, which included template plug and play formulas for door codes, would set the lighting according and the temperatures according to when the guests would be there. So we ran the whole property on, grossing $1 million a year on 2 part-time employees plus the house cleaning staff. I break down the entire operations blueprint in the course. So you can automate and systematize out like 90% of the traditional hotel or like fine resort world like staff need, and then be incredibly thoughtful with the touch points that you do provide and the hospitality that you're delivering on. Any design bonuses when working with wetlands that are part of the property? You got to be very careful with wetlands. It's different in each jurisdiction, but you typically have to stay at like 100 feet away from a wetland. And then even if you're doing that, if there's any wetland on the property, a lot of states